when I was 100%, I'm convinced, on the right and trying to do good to the administration, yet I was victimized. I was at one stage they even issued orders for my suspension, which could not be executed. How? That's a different matter. When on another occasion I was disgraced and humiliated, even when the government was tom-tomming that law and order is their greatest achievement, and that we have established what they called Bhay Mukta Samaj, Danga Rahit Pradesh. On the one hand, you claim that, and then the person, the instrument who helped you achieve that, you disgrace him and humiliate him 3 days later. So, I mean, these instances convince me there's something radically wrong with the system that we have, that even when you are on the right and even when you are trying to enforce the rule of law, you are faulted and you are hounded and you are victimized. Now, one can say that what did you do in the service? Well, even in service, I was one of the most articulate members of the IPS Association of Uttar Pradesh branch, and I remember in UP we have a practice of police week, and during that period we invite the chief minister, and I remember every time they had something, the most inconvenient subject, inconvenient in the sense that normally an officer would be chary of talking on that subject before the chief minister in presence of the bureaucracy, because you always apprehend that bureaucracy would later on victimize you for saying these things. Every time the most inconvenient part was given to me, and I would say that openly without bothering about the consequences. So in service we tried to improve things as far as we could within the framework of the All India Services Conduct Rules. But I found that we were not making any dent, and promises which are made here are they go back on it later on. The classic example was when we prevailed upon the chief minister and he was convinced and he announced that yes, we'll have a commissioner of police. And then an officer is designated as commissioner designate, along with the serving home secretary. They go around different metropolitan centers where there is commissioner just to study the system and come back and implement it. By the time they come back, the proposal is shot down. I said, what is this? I mean, the chief minister can't keep his own assurance given from the platform. So at the end of the service, I felt that I think there is no other avenue left, and one should go to somebody should take up the cudgels and go to the Supreme Court. For 1 year, I studied all the commission reports and sort of crystallized my own thoughts. Then there was problem about getting an advocate, because I knew that I can't pay a penny for this. So I had to look for an advocate who would not charge. So ultimately, and then once I found such an advocate, he said, no, I'm not going to plead for the police. Police is very bad, this, that, and they do this thing wrong, that thing wrong. No, I'm not going to argue for the police. It took me quite some effort to convince him and just to tell him why police is in the dock and why police does things which are criticized by the people. Once he was convinced, he decided to take it up, and that's how I went to the Supreme Court.
Great. So you are awarded Padma Shri for your contribution to national security in 1991. Now, the story that you just mentioned about political interference, if in a broad contrum, if I put it in a broad contour, don't you feel this exists even today? Even after the Supreme Court judgment in 2006?
Yes, it does exist. It does exist. You see, it has to be fought. It's going to be long haul. Mind you, bringing about reforms in the police is more difficult than bringing about reforms in any other department in the country. Because this is one department which enables them wield the stick to sort of browbeat those who are opposed and keep their own followers protected from the stick. You won't get the stick even if you are mafia or whatever it is. So it is a very powerful instrument. So bringing about reforms in the police, as I jokingly say, it's like Samudra Manthan. It took a lot of effort, and this reform in the police in the country is also going to take a lot of effort, and it will happen only when the people of the country also start articulating their demand for police reforms. So far, it is limited to the police fraternity, But I think the demand has to get more broad-based, and once the politicians realize that the people of the country want reforms, then I think there'll be no stopping the process.
Absolutely. Now we are safe and sound here, sitting nicely, quietly, enjoying the evening because of the police. Because police ensures security. Now, having said this, from since 2006, you have been relentlessly campaigning for a police reform. Do you feel that you're satisfied with the way things have moved?
You see, even when the judgment was announced, I wrote an article. There is going to be long haul, and that the interests, the vested interests, whose feathers we have ruffled, they are going to combine and they are going to frustrate our attempt to bring about the transformation which is sought to be achieved by the Supreme Court directions. And that is precisely what happened. I mean, soon after the judgment, they held a conference of all the chief ministers of the states. They held a conference of all the chief secretaries of the states, ostensibly to ensure the implementation of Supreme Court directions, but actually to discuss how to circumvent them. And this is what they have done. All the states decided, and if you study the affidavits of the states initially, in the initial years, they're very defined. Then now the Supreme Court orders amount to go against the provisions of the Constitution. It's against the federalist spirit and we can't comply with it, this. But as Supreme Court kept on mounting pressure, their tenor changed, their language changed, and their attitude also underwent a change. And gradually, willy-nilly, they are coming round, and on paper they claim to have carried out the Supreme Court directions. On paper.
So there are 7 main pointers of the Supreme
Yes.
Court judgment, if I remember correctly,
Mm-hmm.
in 2006. Which of the 7 pointers do you feel has been properly implemented, according to you? Which of the 7 pointers have been properly implemented?
You see, there is only one direction in respect of which there is no controversy. That is the direction about separation of investigation from law and order. On that, there is no difference of opinion, and they say that yes, we are going to implement it, but they say we don't have the staff to execute this. You see, if you separate the staff, separate the work, you need extra staff. But today, what happens if there is a law and order situation? The entire staff, whether it's investigation, law and order, they are all pumped into it. But once you have a staff which is specifically earmarked for investigation, and it is laid down that this staff shall not, repeat, not be diverted for law and order purposes, then there is problem. There is shortage of staff. So that staff has to be created. Unfortunately, there is delay in creating that extra staff. So this direction is being implemented half-heartedly, but it is moving in the right direction.
Now, coming to a very basics in policing in a state. So, when a person goes to file an FIR, half of the time we get complaints that the police station is not taking an FIR out of political reasons, out of political compulsions, or out of any influence. So, how do you see for a common man to circumvent the problem? How do you see this problem to be solved?
You see, this registration of FIR, it may appear very simple matter to you, but it's very complicated. I'll tell you why. Every time the registration of cases shows an upward trend, the Chief Minister calls the DGP and says, "Dekhiye DGP sahab, ऐसे figures को जरा सा इसको manage करके रखिए, doctor करके." So the figures are doctored understanding between the DGP and the State Chief Minister. इसे साहब थोड़ा बढ़ा दीजिए, थोड़ा सा इसी में घटा दीजिए, overall situation लगभग ठीक होनी चाहिए. That is, it happens. And I'll give you some instances from my own state, absolutely scandalous instances. When there was a Home Secretary, I forget who was the Chief Minister, but there was a Home Secretary called Mr. Khodaiji, and the DGP was Shravan Tandon. Orders came from the Home Department that crime should be reduced by 50%. Orders, written orders. Can you imagine anything more scandalous than that? But the Home Department issued that order. Now, do we have a magic wand to reduce crime by 50%? What happened? What would happen in such a situation? The complainant would be shooed away. And that is what happened. Then another instance, there was Chief Minister Mayawati. She said that no, crime has to be reduced by, crime has to be reduced by 70%, something like that she said. And mind you, the officers didn't know what to do, and nobody had the guts to explain to the madam, ये हो नहीं सकता. अब उस जमाने में क्या हुआ, ऑफिसर्स रिड्यूस्ड क्राइम, किसी ने 30% घटाया, किसी ने 40% घटाया, और किसी ने 50% तक घटा दिया. Even then, I think to the best of my memory, 7 superintendents of police stroke DIGs were suspended for not having reduced crime to the extent she wanted. Now, when you have such rulers, what do? सिर पीटने के सिवा और क्या कर सकते हो आप? You can't talk to her, you can't argue with her, and she says 70%. And mind you, this fact was known to the media. Every media had an advertisement with Mayawati raised her hand like this, and achievement number 1, 2, 3, 4 down below. Achievement 1, we have reduced crime by 70%. And the national media was silent. There was no discussion in any TV channel. There was no criticism in any newspaper. Everybody accepted it as it is. The kind of fool that I am, I wrote a letter to the National Human Rights Commission. I wrote about 7-8 pages letter, and I said, look, the human rights of the people of Uttar Pradesh across the state are being violated by their reports not being registered. You know what the NHRC did? They sent a copy of my complaint to the Chief Secretary for comments. क्या comments क्या होंगे? कुछ नहीं होना. NHRC did nothing. The media did not take notice, and the matter went on just like that. So this is how it happens. So, all right, reports must be registered, but the people should be prepared to accept increase in crime, and before that, I think the establishment, the executive, the bureaucracy, and the government should be prepared for an increase in the crime figures, which they are not prepared to this day. There is another problem also. I do not know. If I read in Max Muller's book, What India Can Teach Us, he has praised a lot about India's, the integrity of an average Indian. Sometimes I wonder what happened between the 18th century and the 20th and the 21st century. Something radical happened. Today we have become so litigant. And the normal tendency when a man goes to a police station is, before going to the police station, probably in at least 50% of the cases, he goes to a lawyer. लॉयर कहता भैया इसमें ऐसे नहीं, थोड़ा ये भी बोल दो, लिख दो, तो ये भी दफ़ा बढ़ जाएगी, तब वो गिरफ्तार करेंगे, कॉग्निजेबल बना दो. नॉन कॉग्निजेबल ऑफेंस को वो कॉग्निजेबल बनाना सिखाता है, और फिर जाके a highly exaggerated report is sought to be registered in the police station, and police also doesn't know what to do by. And if you register all those cases, probably just if you register every case, I think we'll have so much of frivolous registration that we will just not know what to do. It's a problem. It's a bit of a problem, and there's a Supreme Court direction also that in certain cases they have said that preliminary inquiry should be conducted to ensure that the facts are true before a report is registered. But this is a matter which needs to be more broad-based. I think some latitude has to be given, because I saw in USA, they don't register a case promptly. Police will come promptly in no time, but they will make a preliminary inquiries, and after that, then alone they will register a report. But in the colonial system which they gave us, this is how it was. I think we need to rethink on how to ensure better registration without hurting the people, and so the politicians should also be agreeable to that. It's a very complicated thing. It's very complicated, and it's not so simple कि पुलिस ने रिपोर्ट नहीं दर्ज की. क्यों नहीं रिपोर्ट दर्ज करते, उसके पीछे बहुत सारे कारण. And they don't have the staff also. If suddenly the crime figures go from say 200 to 800, we just not know what to do. Either the staff should be augmented. Staff, even as it is, as I said, there are more than 500,000 vacancies across the country, and these are on the basis of sanctions given long ago. The present day requirements are much more. So it's a problem. It's a problem, I know, but improvement is definitely called for in the matter. And but I would even concede that even with our existing resources, even with our existing manpower, I think treatment given to a complainant, that calls for a lot of improvement. And even under the existing circumstances, I think there could be improved registration of cases.
Absolutely. Now, with your years of experience as a police officer and then campaigning for police reforms, do you think there is a people's confidence in the police Has it improved over the years? Are people more confident on the police forces? Do they go and take them into, if they have a problem, they are ready to go to the police at the moment instead of trying out any other means to solve it?
I think it would, honestly speaking, it would be difficult to say that confidence in the police has increased over the years. It would be difficult to say that. But one thing which has happened, and it's a very positive development, that police reforms is now in the public domain. People understand that there is something like police reforms, even if they do not know the details, the 7 directions and other things. It is in the public domain, and every time there is a crisis on the law and order front, crisis in the sense of something where police have been caught on the wrong foot. Every time that happens, you will find that the question of the Supreme Court judgment, police reforms case, Prakash Singh case, every editorial or article on the subject will mention this. So it is now in the public domain and is gradually catching up. And I find a lot of people, I would say, from different states, they keep on writing to me, कि सर इसमें हम क्या योगदान दे सकते हैं, about how can we join. So it is gradually, this I think is a very positive gain, that police reforms, today the fact that you are discussing it in Calcutta Club is also, it's an indicative of the fact that this is a relevant subject. And not having it, it's at great cost to the society, at great cost to the society in terms of feeling of security, in terms of feeling more confident about their life, their property, their honor. So the fact that it is in the public domain is by itself, I think, an achievement. And secondly, I would say the states, if you examine their affidavits, the recent affidavits, they all are trying to, just to avoid a contempt notice from the Supreme Court, they are trying to show on paper कि साहब नहीं मैंने ये कर दिया वो कर दिया. It's another matter that what they write to the Supreme Court, submit before the Supreme Court is challenged by me. That this is the situation on paper, but on the ground, it is not reflected for reasons A, B, C, which I have been giving in my counter affidavits. So it's the states are on the defensive on this subject, which also is a positive gain. That they know कि भाई इसको करना है नहीं तो डंडा पड़ेगा. For the last 3 years, police reforms subject went in a limbo because of the pandemic and also because of the inertia of the Chief Justices, which we had during this period. But I think with this Chief Justice, I have already started making a move, and he has promised to sort of resurrect the issue once again. And I think very soon it will be again in the public domain. I mean, in the courtroom, and of course through the courtroom, in the media and to the people.
One thing that comes to the forefront is that when a state has found a few loopholes, do you believe states have found a few loopholes in circumventing the Supreme Court directives, in the sense that, for example, if you put when your time comes to nominate a director general of police for a state, so you ask for 3 senior most officers' name, and they find some loophole to get across, to circumvent that, to put their own officers there. Similarly, police establishment boards for posting police officers in different districts, those also, many states have circumvented that. Are you satisfied with that, with the way things are going at the moment?
No,
or do you believe this has been happening?
No, you see, I know there are loopholes, and I think bureaucracy in this country, maybe in other countries also, they have mastered the art of circumventing judicial direction. I'm sorry to be making this a statement, but they've mastered the art. Not only in police matters, in several other matters, whether it's environment or any other matter, they have mastered this art, and they will say that yes, we are doing it, but when actually they are not doing it. Now, it is a problem, and on the appointment of DGP, in fact, I have elicited opinion from different states, and the UPSC involvement, I'm myself beginning to have some second thoughts, and I'm toying with the idea of again going to the Supreme Court on the subject and saying that instead of having UPSC, because between the UPSC and the states there is a lot of problem. There is a lot of problem. They say something, UPSC says something. It's not working very harmoniously. So I was thinking whether this could also be the selection of the DGP should be left to 3 people: the Chief Minister of the state, Leader of the Opposition, and the Chief Justice of the state. That it be done locally in the state capital instead of sending it to Lucknow, from Lucknow to Delhi, and Delhi again, and then again fresh questions and fresh responses. It's taking a lot of time, and sometimes I mean, the, the Supreme Court was recently angry on the appointment with the UPSC for not preparing the panel for DGP Nagaland.
Yes.
That came in the papers also. So the system is not really working very well. I mean, not only UPSC is to blame, the states are also to blame. In Punjab, I think they have messed up with the appointment of DGPs recently. Within the last 2 years, I think they have had 3 or 4 DGPs. I'm getting material from Punjab also. I'm going to put that across to the Supreme Court that I think this particular clause needs to be rethought over.
So your new recipe is to have the Chief Minister, the Leader of Opposition and the Chief Justice of the state to form a panel to have the DGP appointed.
Yes, they are all locally available. They can sit down anytime and decide on the issue instead of referring it to UPSC taking its own time.
Exactly. Now, what is the progress in implementing the judicial directions so far across the country?
You see, overall, if you see on paper, as I said, on paper they all pretend to comply with the directions of the Supreme Court, but if you analyze them deeply, and I have submitted before the Supreme Court that these are the deviations from your directions, and that actually in letter and spirit they are violating the directions. On paper they are showing compliance, but in letter and spirit they are. I mean, to give one example, now they say that every state should have a state security commission. Idea being that to insulate police from outside pressures, and they said that the state security commission should be so constituted that it is balanced between representatives of the state government and representatives from civil society. 50% sarkari aadmi, 50% bahar ke aadmi. The idea is that when you pick up from civil society, there should be men of proven integrity, incorruptible people who are respected by society for their objectivity, for their independence of thought. Now, that is on paper. Now, what the government is doing, they are selecting men of great repute, but who are known to be government supporters. Now, this is going against the spirit of the directions. Then we said that the Supreme Court said that any finding of the State Security Commission should be binding on the state government. Now, barring 1 or 2 states, everybody has said it will be recommendatory, not a binding. Now, if it is recommendatory, then you may not as well not have the commission. Then the purpose of having a State Security Commission is defeated. So that is how they are cleverly finding loopholes, or they are setting up institutions but making them toothless, dysfunctional, and not really achieving the objective set out by the Supreme Court. Besides, I mean, one thing more I would like to clarify. See, so when I talk of police reforms, I am not referring, or I do not mean only the Supreme Court mandated directions. Supreme Court mandated directions are like the core of the problem, the heart of the problem. But it's a much bigger problem, and when we talk of police reforms, I mean manpower vacancies to be adequate manpower should be available, transport deficiency should be met, communication should be improved, we should have more forensic laboratories, we should have better housing, modernization, sort of reducing the workload of the police. See, today police carries on its shoulders not only the burden of law and order and crime investigation, but any income tax party going for a raid, bhaiya jara police de do. Anybody going for demolition, bhaiya police de do. Excise raid, forest raids, we have to assist so many other departments in carrying out their executive functions. Now this has to be thought over. I mean, हम अपना काम करें या दूसरों को काम करने के लिए उनकी मदद करें. So I mean, these are also matters. So it's a wide spectrum, and Supreme Court mandated reforms constitute the core.
Great. But then, do you feel that reforms mandated by the Supreme Court, and you have mentioned in your book the struggle for police reforms, that you need people to also come forward, and the people also have to move it. So how do you foresee that, A, and B is, where do you see the reform taking place in future? How do you see the pace of reforms picking up in future?
You see, there are 2 things which can happen, which would accelerate and bring about the required reforms. One, either the present Chief Minister or either the present Prime Minister or some Prime Minister in future suddenly gets it in his brain that yes, we must have police reform. I mean, a man like Robert Peel, I mean, he brought about changes in British police. if someday it gets into the head of the Prime Minister that yes, the Prime Minister talked of smart police and it was a brilliant concept in 2014, but somehow it was not followed up. Why? I do not know. I do not know the inside story. Maybe people would have told him कि सर ये आपने क्या कह दिया और इसको तो implement करने में बड़ी दिक्कत होगी. I mean, things like that they may have said. Smart police. S for smart, M for mobile, A for accountable, R for responsive, T for techno savvy. So a brilliant concept. But how do you bring about this kind of accountability or responsiveness unless you have the kind of reforms directed by the Supreme Court implemented in in the real sense of the term? That won't happen. So, I mean, maybe some Prime Minister, it may get into his head that we have to bring about this reform. That is one. Two, the voice of the people. Once people start realizing, we can't have this police, no, this is becoming too much, and once this becomes some kind of an election issue, and once there is pressure from the people that no, it has to figure in your election manifesto that you will introduce reforms once you are voted to power. Once that happens, I think then also government would be obliged to. In fact, a friend of mine, K.V. Ramarao, Kakula Mari Vijay Ramarao, he was my batchmate. He became a minister later on in Telugu Desam. He told me an interesting story. He said, Prakash, you may not be aware, but I was touring during the elections and I found a speaker who was haranguing the audience, and the thrust of the argument was that this government has not introduced police reforms, but when we are voted to power, we'll introduce police reforms. No, it may not have meant anything. It may have been just a small ripple. But the point is that he was a witness to police reforms being talked about at an election meeting. Maybe the ripples would spread, and more people would be concerned and would throw in their weight to bring about the much needed reforms.
Absolutely. Now, during your you have headed two very important states, Uttar Pradesh and Assam. During your years of experience then and what you see now, of course, your son is an illustrious police officer also, is a deputy NSA now. So, during those times and now, do you see any difference in political parties taking the help of police to win elections?
You see, it is the desire is there, but now I think the Election Commission has got powers which it did not have then. I remember those days, every time an election used to be held in UP, there was a DIG, I won't mention his name. He would be specially called and posted to DGP's office and responsible for postings and transfers of officers. Post such officers at places where they will ensure the victory of the such and such party which is ruling. He would be called. He would become DIG administration sitting in DGP's office, and his job was just to ensure that officers well disposed towards the ruling party are posted in key positions, and they ensure whatever hanky-panky happens during the election. But now the Election Commission has got extraordinary powers, and they, whenever they get complaints about officers aligned to a party, they get them transferred out. So it is much less now, and I think the police capacity to influence the election outcome is very much less today, thanks to the Election Commission and thanks to the trend which Session set in.
That has definitely improved matters, you feel. So another thing that comes to our mind is that when during the olden days, in your time and now during this time, there are situations when they say that police are often there to manage an area. I mean, a deputy commissioner of police or a superintendent of police of a particular district. So you manage the area so that you can control law and order situation instead of taking law and order action in law and order situation. So do you think why your police reforms after the your Prakash Singh versus Government of India case in 2006 judgment, do you think this situation is improved, or is still a situation where an officer goes to a district or a division just to ensure that his area is managed well?
Whether the area is managed or it is controlled and regulated, it will depend upon complex set of factors. A, what the leadership at the center wants, what the Home Minister wants, what my own boss wants, and how much of courage I have at my level to do the right thing irrespective of what others think. It all depends. If you have a courageous officer who may run into trouble later on for doing the right things. So it has become, it's a very complex thing. How things will be handled at the ground level, it will depend upon, as I said, a complex set of factors, and to the extent the officer is prepared to play ball or say no, this is the right thing and I'll do this, irrespective of the consequences which follow. But mind you, the category, the percentage of such officers is diminishing every passing year.
The percentage of such officers is diminishing every year.
Yes, the percentage of officers who would have the courage to, no, I'll enforce the rule of law irrespective of what happens. That percentage is diminishing. Everybody wants to swim with the current. They say, this is how the government wants, why should I bother? This is the problem. It's a real problem.
So lastly, what I want to say is, are you still hopeful?
I'm still hopeful. I'm convinced that, India has a great future, and that great future will happen only with changes in the police also. It will happen with changes in so many other spheres, not only police. I'm not overemphasizing the role of police, but police has to play its mandated constitutional role of enforcing the rule of law. Unless that happens, it would be very difficult for us to emerge as a credible, powerful, progressive country. Just to give one example, today you have 43% people in the parliament who have a questionable background according to the Association of Democratic Reforms. Now, the worrying thing is that if you examine this percentage over a period of last 4 elections, from 23 or 24, it has now come up to 43. The graph is steadily going up. It is not that it went down and then it went. It is just going up. Now, this has to be arrested. That's why I say if democracy is to survive in this country, this trend has to be reversed. And we should be able to put them behind bars. Today we are not, because he is protected by the CM. If not protected by the CM, maybe protected by somebody at the center. This has to stop. This has to go, and people will have to raise their voice on this. If a man has committed a crime in Lakhimpur, the man must go, whether he's the son of a minister or whatnot. So what? See, the public have to become articulate. They have to raise their voice, and they have to forget about their caste equations, and they have to forget about regional considerations, communal considerations. For the rule of law to prevail, the support of the people is also a must. The problem is how many people in the country want this rule of law. This is another question. How many people in the country want it? They want the rule. They want things to be done as per their own narrow sectarian, caste, communal interests. And for that they vote a mafia send a mafia to the parliament. For this, the people will have to take responsibility. The people, I think the progressive opinion will have to prevail that no, why is it that when you talk of winnability of a candidate, you select a criminal? So, not only the politicians are responsible, the people of this country are also responsible. They have to be more progressive, and they have to rise above this narrow, as I said, caste, sectarian, communal, and other regional or other narrow considerations.
Absolutely, but it's very, very heartening to know that you're again going to knock at the door of the Supreme Court to initiate more reforms to ensure that these are properly implemented at the ground level.
Yes, they have to be implemented properly. You don't try to fool us that we are doing it when you are not doing it. If I can see through their stratagem and their crookedness, I'll do whatever I can at my level. But at the state level, when people bring that to my notice, and when particular officers are affected, my answer is simple. Please, you move the High Court at your level. I can't be running all over the country, and it's not possible for me also.
Absolutely. That's a big takeaway from Mr. Prakash Singh, that he will relentlessly keep on campaigning, and we will also be with Mr. Prakash Singh in this campaign. Now I'll request our audience to ask questions if they have any. Mr. Singh is there to answer. So they'll just pass the mic around, and maybe we can just identify yourself and ask a question. I'll ask Sanjukta or Munmun to just carry the mic around, please. And if somebody wants to put in a question there, I think there.
माइक आ गया आपके पास देखिए.
Sir, if you can identify yourself, please.
No, no, broken means
So if you can just repeat your question. Yeah.
Yeah, my question is on the topic itself. Why are we saying that India's police force is broken? What does it signify?
broken in the sense that in the sense A, people have tried to communalize it. People have tried to introduce caste divisions. I mean, during a particular chief minister, I think you would know, I don't have to name him. There was a massive recruitment of people belonging to one community only. Mind you, not that money was not being taken in recruitment by those people. The only problem was that, all right, if you belong to that caste, you pay 2 lakhs. If you don't belong to that caste, you pay 4 lakhs. Yes, I mean that was the rate, and those people are still very much there. So along the caste division has been introduced in the police, and that is one thing. Then another thing which is causing great concern, that a lot of officers carry what I say an invisible stamp on their foreheads, that he is aligned to this party. Because that is what happens when every time there is a change of government. You find wholesale transfer of one group of officers and installation and postings of importance to a different set of officers. They know कि भाई ये तो इस पार्टी का supporter है, ये लोग इस पार्टी के supporter हैं. The people are known. At least 70-80% officers can be identified that way. So that is another kind of division which has taken place. Then one could go on adding to this kind of division. So in the enforcement of laws, again there is discrimination. Mind you, if the laws by themselves most of the laws are by themselves, they are all right. But it is their application which causes problems. You apply that stringently against one group, and you apply that very leniently, or don't apply that to another group. It happens. I think you understand what I mean. It happens particularly in communal situations. It happens particularly in tribal areas. I mean, one of the factors which have given rise to Naxal problem, is the alienation of land. The laws are different laws are applied to them, and wholesale people have been deprived of their land because the land has to be given to a corporate group, or some company has to be set up, some industrial unit is to come up, or mining is to be done. People are just pushed out. So they're all kind of, having good laws is one thing, applying them evenly, squarely, and with a sense of fairness and justice, that's a different. So there are all kinds of factors which are making it difficult for the police to function as a cohesive unit, with a clear mandate and applying the laws with a sense of fairness, with a sense of justice and fair deal to everyone. So I mean, I hope it partly explains your yeah.
Mr. Prakash Singh, this is Tathagat Roy. We have met before a number of times.
Of course, sir.
Namaskar.
Pleasure meeting you and honor meeting you, sir.
No, not at all. It's my honor that I'm meeting you. See, today in the morning there was a news over the TV that a professor of an university where I used to teach has been acquitted of his crime with which he was charged, and he was imprisoned for one night for insulting the chief minister or something like that. All that he had done is that he had received and forwarded a Facebook post about a cartoon about the chief minister. Now this is endemic in this state, slapping of false cases. Slapping of false cases is an incredible problem. I myself have been a victim of it, and I have spent one night in jail because of this thing. I was slapped with a case of attempt to murder when I was 40 kilometers away from the location of the murder. There was no murder actually. There was a small case of rioting, but I'm not bringing my personal case into it. What reforms would you suggest to prevent or to teach the police not to slap false cases? Just to add, there are few sections in the Indian Penal Code 218, 219, 220. These are hardly ever put to action. Would this be of use, or is there any other action possible? Thank you.
Look, whenever I address the police officer, and especially when I address the young police officers and probationers, one thing which I always harp upon, that when you are in khaki, rule of law is the highest religion for you. This is what I have written in my book also on the struggle for. Forget about caste, forget about community, forget about who is ruling or who is not ruling, who is in opposition. You have to enforce the rule of law. This is the highest religion for you. And if they act in that spirit, the kind of slapping of false cases, I mean, that would have essentially, somebody from the Home Department, I can assure you, would have rung up the Superintendent Police कि ये काम करो तुम, इन्होंने ऐसा किया, इसको सबक सिखाना है. Somebody must have said. And the man at the ground level in the district must have succumbed to that pressure. No.
General, this is general location of false cases, fake cases all over the country, all over. So how do you look at the reforms?
No, fake cases, you see, I mean, we have also to, as I said, some kind of preliminary inquiry must be conducted before the case is registered. Some kind of. I mean, Supreme Court has limited that to only some cases like matrimonial disputes or matter of commerce and something. They have said 3 or 4 cases. But I think this needs to be broad-based. We have become very litigant, and we have now become specialists in leveling false allegations, fictitious charges, fake complaints. We have become specialists in that. And this disease has gone down to the villages. I think maybe it is worse in the villages. So I think police must be given that discretion of wherever they have a doubt, they must conduct a preliminary inquiry before actually registering it in black and white.
So initial inquiry before you register
Yes.
a case. So any other questions that we have, Ren?
I don't have a question, but in response to the earlier question, the basic fact is that our entire police system has broken down. Our training systems are in many places, we don't have a proper training system. Training in many places ad hoc. The training instructors are also do not have a tenure. If someone is not found suitable in some place, ठीक है, उसको PTC Barakpur में भेज दो. And I'm just naming the name of PTC Barakpur, but it can happen elsewhere also. The second is that the people who are working in the field, they do not have a security of tenure. When I decide to take an action as per law, I may be there for just I may have just joined up 2 days back, but I will be posted out. The entire morale of a police force breaks down when these kinds of transfers take place. And in your case in the Supreme Court, one of the things is the security of my tenure. Until and unless I have a proper security of my tenure, what I want to do, what new things I want to do, it's not possible for me to implement all this. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for developing that point. In fact, I was going through the definition of rule of law as given by Harold Lasky about different people. Lasky has in his last sentence laid great stress on this, that if you want to have the rule of law, the officers in the field must have security of tenure. I mean, this is part of the definition of rule of law given by Harold Lasky.
Security of tenure is also mentioned in that 7 pointers that the Supreme Court.
It is there, yes. And just to tell you how the Supreme Court enlarged my own prayer. When the discussions were going on security of tenure, in the initial prayer, petition, the prayers, I had talked of security of tenure only for the Directors General. Because I was very cautious कि भाई उतना ही मांगो जितना मिल जाए. If you make it very broad-based and you ask for so many things, your petition tends to get rejected. You may not be aware, but two very formidable and great reputation IAS officers, Mr. Madha Godbole and Mr. Subramaniam, I think, of UP. No, not Mr. Subramaniam. There's an Andhra officer. I'm forgetting his name. Officer. There was an officer from Andhra, very devoted officer, absolutely. These two officers went to the Supreme Court with such a large set of demands that it was thrown out on the very first date and not. So I was very cautious. But during the discussions on security of tenure, the Supreme Court itself said, why are you talking of only security of tenure to DGP? And they said, no, even the SHO should have that. Once he said that, I said, why not? So in the next submissions, I modified that prayer. So that's how it is now SHO, then Superintendent Police and DIG range, IG zone, everyone supposed to have security of tenure.
Yeah, Mr. Singh, can I ask a question, please?
Yes.
Yeah, this side.
Yeah.
This is Adib Guptu. While we are trying to firm up the communications to reach out to the members for about 2 nights even, we chanced upon a huge reservoir of your work in the literary space. And so how, we heard you now, how would you link that up to your crusade, number one? And number two, are you still pursuing it? And is there a common thread to all the work which is out in the literary space? And what are you working upon next?
What space?
Literary space.
You've
Books.
written books.
Books.
Books that you.
Thank you.
Look, I have been writing, after I retired, I said, look, now the sword is gone, let me now use the pen. Of course, they say pen is mightier than the sword. I don't think it's mightier than the sword, but that one source of strength was gone. Then I fell back on the pen, and I have been writing to the best of my ability, I would say. But that literary work and the police reform, there's no conflict in that. I have so far, they mentioned 9, but actually 10 books I have completed, and 11th one is with Rupa, that should come out in June. And I hope that turns out to be the last book. So these books I have been writing, and during the pandemic, when I found that I had nothing to do and I can't go out, and my lectures and everything had to stop, I said I will utilize the time by writing. And during that period, I edited 1 book and wrote 2. So this writing work has been going on, and apart from articles for journals. So I don't know what is the problem. My police reforms campaign and this literary work, if you call it that way.
No, there's no problem.
Huh.
Just you explain the thread, the common thread, and the background by which, during which you thought about conceptualize these books and why you started writing. And we are glad to hear that you're into your 11th work, and we will be glad to host you here if you want to launch the book.
Oh, I'd
Thank
love
you.
to. Thank you for that offer.
Sir,
In fact, just one former Chief Justice Lahoti, उनका प्रकाश सिंह साहब आप कितना ये सब लिख देते हैं, हमें तो कभी कभी ताज्जुब होता, आपको डर नहीं लगता, आप ये सब बातें लिख देते हैं. मैंने कहा क्या डरना क्या है, अब आई हैव नथिंग टू लूज नाउ.
Sir, I am Sudhir Mishra. Sir, during your study on police reforms, you might have studied international models of policing also when you are formulating this, and you might have studied them now also. Sir, so during your study of international models of policing, which model of policing of which country did you like, and could you take anything from that model to support the police reforms, the model which you proposed in Supreme Court? That's my question, sir.
Look, every country evolves a model. It's some kind of historical process. You can't just say that I'll take Japan model and plant it here. That doesn't happen. The model evolves. Then as it evolves, you can bring about changes. But absolutely radical transformation from one model to another, that is difficult. But two countries whose models impressed me and where policing was comparatively good, and the people could be proud of their police. One was the Japan police and the other was the UK police. These two police forces are really, they are constitutionally on good foundations.
So any more questions? We've also heard about the UP Police Special Task Force. We have also heard about Mumbai Police, Bengal Police.
Good evening. I'm Professor Prasad Ranjan Das. Although I'm not a police, during my service I made constructions and plannings for many police projects, thereby having a very close relation with the police. I was the chief architect for the government of West Bengal. My question is that when I was very young, I was taught by my family members, because I descend from the family of freedom fighters, having Deshabandhu Chittaranjan Das as my ancestor, that what is morally wrong cannot be politically or practically right. Gradually, after maturing in the service, I learned that the set of those old values are in a volatile and variable condition with the compelling situation. Now, it adds to this caption there behind. Broken police force. Police force can save the people from the endless misery even after the 75 years of independence, but they are not let to have the goal achieved. Please tell me, Mr. Prakash Singh, you are a writer, a police officer, a thinker, that how the police force can be protected from the compulsion of going against the interest of common people who are in endless miseries to serve the interest of some scoundrels in the name of VIPs. And my recipe is there written, that a police revolt like naval mutiny that saved India from colonialism and parallel police force like INA is necessary. National police force will serve the interest of the people and not the leaders. It may be radical, but I think I'm putting the cards very sincerely before your table. Thank you, sir.
You are making a very tall demand. But I would say that, I always tell the police officer that you look, in the performance of your duties, remember certain things. One, life is not an air-conditioned journey. You should be prepared for ups and downs. You should be prepared for setbacks. You should be prepared for traumatic experiences. You should be prepared to face humiliations even when you did not deserve it. But let these things happen when you are convinced, at least morally and from the innermost recesses of your heart, that yes, I am doing the right thing and in the best interest of the people of the country. Then if you suffer, it's okay. I am prepared to suffer that. But the problem with the present generation is that they are not prepared to suffer. They are not prepared to pay the price. They would rather swim with the current, even if it's a dirty current. You see, the values that you talked of, there's a terrible erosion in those values. Terrible erosion in those values. Can you find those values even at the social level, even at the family level? Can you find that? It's not there. It's not there in the schools. It's not there at home. It's not reflected in the services. Values are just not there. So with the kind of erosion that we are witnessing in the values, otherwise it's very simple. I mean, I'll give you a very simple solution to the present day problems, but even that is not practicable. Let 10 senior most IAS officers and 10 senior most IPS officers take a pledge that they will not carry out wrong orders. The senior most officers. कहाँ से लाएंगे वो DGP? कहाँ से लाएंगे वो Chief Secretary? लाएंगे तो यहीं से ना? They have to select an officer from the state only. They can't import from USA or Russia. If 10 officers say that no, we shall not carry out wrong orders. Now mind you, it sounds very simple. But in actual practice I have found it doesn't work. One man says this and there are one man or maybe two people, and I should not be saying man, but now there are women also. So 2 persons say this, but there will be 8 persons, and out of 8 persons who will be willing to oblige, and out of those 8, there will be at least 2 or 3 who will quietly go to the Chief Minister and say, Sir, ye rahi topi, I am prepared to work as a party worker, aap mujhe DG bana dijiye. This has happened, I know such officers. So as I keep on telling officers that look, the Supreme Court has given you institutional protection, but they cannot give you spine. That spine you have to discover yourself and show that in actual practice. You talked of Police Establishment Board. The Police Establishment Board has the power to decide on transfers and postings. But in quite a few states what is happening is that the government sends a list that these transfers are to be carried out and all the 4 officers sign it. If one officer were to sign it, I could say that this man is weak, but if 4 officers collectively sign it, it shows there's something seriously wrong. You don't have the spine. So how to bring that spinal strength? How to bring about those values that you are prepared to sacrifice for your values? नहीं बुलाया तो है, मैं आपको बता तो सकता हूँ, पर मैं इस पीढ़ी को इतना ये आदर्श कहाँ से लाएं? ये आदर्श देखिए, these ideals have to start at home and they have to be strengthened in schools and colleges. It is neither happening at home nor in schools and colleges. That is the problem.
So we'll take one last question if there is any.
Sir, my name is Prashad Ranjan Rai, which is very similar to his, and we had been schoolmates for when we were child. And I used to be a civil servant, retired quite a few years back. In fact, I was Home Secretary when these discussions were going on. I'd heard you also. My point is that you have seen what has happened in these years. After Supreme Court orders, patchily implemented, sometimes not implemented, then people circumventing it. In my view, nothing much really has changed. Maybe the structure has changed a little bit, but within that structure, the same old connections, political influencing, etc. keep on going. And behind some of it is filthy lucre also. But one point which my friend there mentioned, he was incidentally one of the finest police officers I had seen in my career. What he mentioned was that training, too little attention is given to police training. So that is something that somehow has not featured in those main points of action that he had featured. So invariably when someone is found inconvenient, he is pushed out to the training institutions, DIG training, whatever. So that is something that requires consideration. And the other thing is, there is always this complaint that the state governments make, and they will keep on making, when you try to bring in something through the Supreme Court with the help of the Home Ministry, that police and law and order, these are state issues. And indirectly we are trying to put in central control over state matters. Now this is something that really has to be sorted out at a level with that the Supreme Court does not represent the central government. The Supreme Court is the Supreme Court, is the supreme judicial authority in the country. And then they have to monitor. I think the Supreme Court has to monitor the functioning of these police reforms instruments in each and every state, how they are going on, what is happening, what is not happening. Only then maybe we see the light at the end of the tunnel. Well, frankly, I don't see much light at the end of the tunnel. I don't know by the time I pass on from this to a different world whether really policing will change. The other point which you did touch upon was a manning of the thanas and all. The basic issue is that now invariably they are highly short of staff, and the solution appears to be to recruit people either in the name of home guards or whatever we call them, and they come from the society, which means they are actually pushed by political forces. And this way, the thana has staff on which the writ doesn't run. So this is also becoming a major issue as I see it. And I don't frankly see much change coming in the future, but since you are going to the Supreme Court, please give some view on this manning to be at an appropriate level and training, these two issues. Thank you.
I'll briefly respond to the three major points that you have mentioned. About training, there's no difference of opinion. I entirely agree with you that training has to improve and has to get proper emphasis. In fact, I have repeatedly said that the kind of culture that prevails in the army, where going to a training institution is a matter of prestige, it's a matter of honor, and it is linked to your promotion. If you have not done this training, you will not get that promotion. I mean, similar culture should be inculcated in the police also. I entirely agree with you on that. And it's very unfortunate that the officers most unwanted by the establishment, they are dumped in the training institutions, they are demotivated, they are frustrated, and they are incapable of sort of giving any inspiration or any projecting any idealism before the trainees there. So, but in training, let me tell you, some terrible things are happening. You see, the state level we had training had gone for a 6, and the status of policing report, which was published by the Common Cause, they say during the last 5 years only 6 point something they have said, 6 to 7%. These are the only people who have received training in the entire force. This was their calculation. In the center, I'll tell you something which is terrible happening. We were in the paramilitary forces or the Central Armed Police Forces, we were very keen that one company should be kept earmarked for training. And a battalion generally had 6 companies, and 6 companies was not to be touched. And the idea was the company will do training for 2 months, and so all the 6 companies would be rotated, and within a year their training would be complete. And government at one stage said, no, we found that all the 6 companies are being deployed. Then when we started complaining that, look, you are not letting the boys get training, they said, all right, we will give every battalion 7 companies. 6 will be deployed and 7th one will be available for your training. There was a lot of protest that this goes against the structure of a battalion. 7 companies you don't have in a battalion. But government in the Babugiri, you will have to have 7 battalion. All right, 7 companies. Now I am told that even the 7th company is being deployed. ये तो कोई बात नहीं हुई साहब. Matlab the central armed police forces are also not getting training, and their performance would also gradually decline over the years. But training is absolutely valid point. The other point you said was about that this is a state subject. I'll tell you a story without giving any sort of firm opinion on the subject. And this story was narrated by Mr. Phali Nariman, the great constitutional expert, at one of the Indian Police Foundation meetings. He said, look, the forests were initially in the state list. A state came when people started realizing that सब जगह जंगल कटते जा रहे हैं. The forests, I mean, the country is being denuded of its green cover, and at this rate probably we'll be left with no green cover. So a set of environmentalists went in a delegation to the Prime Minister, and they said, Madam, India will become a desert if forests remain in the state list. She brought it in the concurrent list, and since then the green cover is now being stabilized and as at a not very good but at a respectable level. So it says similarly police is being devastated by the state governments. Either you bring it in the concurrent list or this will also be finished. Now whether it should come in the concurrent list or not, that is a subject of long discussion. I won't go into it. There is enough to say for it, and there is something to say against it also. But that let that debate be for another occasion.
Thank you very much. Oh, Sundita. Oh.
Thank you, sir, for all that we taking our trouble to coming to the city and because learn many things. So one thing I'd like to mention: the recent trained in number of states, particularly where the regional parties are there, and other states also, that encouraging the police officers in junior level, working in police station, to encourage them to go and extort money or go indulge in corruption, along with the ruling political party, local leaders at their pre-election money. And this is becoming a serious sufferings of the common people. Not only in districts or rural, but also maybe in cities also. And their immediate senior officers and police and all, the better they try to avoid taking any action, or for obvious reason, knowing that they are having this kind of quiet hand in groups. That is becoming such a serious threat in day-to-day life of the common people in the streets. And this is a very unique way. And so police people working in junior level police station, they are feeling almost being encouraged almost in everyday life. The serious concern of the common people who don't know how one should, things could be checked. It's becoming a day-to-day threat in, police management. Thank you, sir.
I think this kind of extortion happens only under certain circumstances, when either supervision is poor from the officers level. There is also when some demand is to be met in, I'm giving you a particular example. In Delhi, I was told that officers at a certain level, they have to be fed from Delhi thanas certain amount of money, which goes, as they said, goes further up also. It happened at a particular time. It is not always happening. But these are the reasons how these things happen. At the political level, I remember there was one chief minister in UP whose birthday was being celebrated. And every district got instruction that money should be collected and sent to Lucknow for the chief minister's birthday. And then every thana and every chowki, they would collect money. And when they collect such money, you can rest assured part of it would be siphoned also. In Maharashtra, there was a terrible example when the Commissioner of Police was collecting how many 100 crores per month from the dance bars and restaurants and whatnot, and he said it was going to the Home Minister. That's a very fresh case. So these things are happening. I'm not denying it. It's a wrong practice. It's a disgraceful practice. These things happen only when there is poor supervision, either at the officer level or at the bureaucratic level. There is some demand to be met, or at the political level. कहीं न कहीं problem होता है, तभी ये सब होता है. And if the officers know that, you see, it is for the senior officer, I say, he has to set an example and convey a message that this thing will not happen.
The thing that you said initially, that you need to have a spine.
नहीं, मैं एक छोटा सा एग्जाम्पल दूँ. बड़े पुराने ज़माने का एग्जाम्पल है. These days recruitment has been very systematized. It's all computerized, and your chips are put here, and you can't defraud anyone. When I was conducting recruitment in UP, none of these facilities were available. It happened long ago when I was a DGP. But I gave instruction. What I did, I selected superintendents of police of proven integrity. मैंने कहा देखो तुम्हें भर्ती करना है, और जितने दिन भर्ती करना है, those days fortunately there was no mobile. You will not attend to any telephone calls. And I told the CID, the vigilance and the intelligence of the area that you keep a watch over the recruitment there. And then you know what was the result? It came in the newspapers, and Kanpur edition of Times of India. People are moving with bags of money, but there are no takers for recruitment. So recruitment for the first time in UP, without any technical gadgetry, it was done without any money changing hands. So these things are possible if this supervision is strict, and if the message goes firmly and unequivocally that if I find anything wrong, then you'll face the consequences. So these things are possible, I would say, but either there's weakness at our supervision level, or at the administrative level, or at the political level. There's something wrong somewhere which leads to such instances happening. And of course there's some low-level corruption which keeps on happening. Not to justify it, it's happening in police, it's happening in several other departments also. But these are things which they should be curbed, and at least there should be no sanction, approval, or direct or indirect demand from higher levels.
Thank you very much, Mr. Singh, for a wonderful session, 1.5 hour long session. And I must thank the Calcutta Club for helping us organize this session. I mean, they are a partner in this. And special thanks goes out to, on our behalf, to Dr. Atul, the Inspector General of BSF, and Madam Kasturi Raha of Calcutta Club, for initiating this program, for conceptualizing this program. And special thanks on behalf of our fraternity in Kolkata, of the people of Kolkata, to Mr. Prakash Singh for coming here and addressing us and taking these questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Singh, for being here. It's been a pleasure hosting you here in this historic Kolkata and in this club. And to the wonderful audience, people sitting in the audience are all luminaries, it's an august gathering, some of the biggest brains of Kolkata. Wonderful questions, and I'm sure we're going to take from what, it's been a big takeaway from what I can gather from Mr. Singh. He mentioned that he's going to take these things forward and relentlessly keep on his campaign, and he's going to come up in the Supreme Court once again. So thanks a lot, everybody. Mr. Singh is of course available once he steps down, and I'll hand it over to the cultural social secretary of the club for the vote of thanks.
I won't say thank you. All I'll say is we are grateful to this every person. It had been a really thought-provoking, reformative speech, and yes, the discussion have been prolific, one of the best that I have seen in Calcutta Club, because my thanks go to our dear members who themselves are real stalwarts in their field. Thank you, dear audience. Our grateful thanks to Mr. Singh. With one rider. So you said probably your last book. Sir, this is beginning of your journey. We look forward for many more from you. And the next time, not only your book launch, your book should be here for us to get it. And definitely thanks to very dear Ovijit and his media house, A&M Media. Thank you so much for co-hosting the program this evening. And of course, to the BSF band. You perhaps enjoyed their music at the beginning. It's time for some more from them. Thank you and good night. Let the band continue.
Very nice meeting you, sir, after a long time.